So today, Stacy Benge. Stacy is an early childhood author and keynote speaker. She's the author of the book, The Whole Child Alphabet. And she approaches early learning with practicality and common sense. Her passions include whole child development, physical development, language development, emergent literacy, and child-led play to build solid foundations for success in school and life. Stacy believes that children learn best through authentic, simple experiences. Her book, as you see there, The Whole Child Alphabet, How Children Actually Develop Literacy, is published by Exchange Press. She recently was a keynote speaker at the Early Childhood Summit here in our state of Pennsylvania. So welcome, Stacy.
Thank you. Get my screen shared. All right. So thank you guys so much for having me, and I'm excited to talk about play-based literacy, embracing all types of play to build literacy foundations. And to kind of get us started, and I know those of y'all who were here early, the question was asked, but I would like for you all to think about back to your childhoods and think about those play experiences and the play activities that you just absolutely love. Think about like if you're home for the holidays or during summer break. And I'd like for you to put in the chat what were those play activities that you just truly loved. And those of y'all who mentioned earlier, you can put the same one in, or you might have thought about another one, but share in the chat what were things that you just absolutely loved to play.
And a quick tech note, when you look inside your chat box, there's a drop-down menu. You can either chat to everyone or hosts and panelists. And if you just make sure it's toggled to everyone, then everyone will be able to see your play memory. Stacy, we've got Red Rover climbing, hide and seek. Oh, Fisher Price toys, patty cake house. These are fast. Oh, red light, green light, 1, 2, 3. Sardines versus tag. Lots of fun, like gross motor outside physical game memories. Jacks, ice skating.
Ice skating, not from Texas. I'm
Yeah.
in Texas, so I always wanted to ice skate and always envied when you'd see in the movies people would be ice skating on the ponds, something I've never experienced. Well, keep putting those in the chat if you haven't had the opportunity to do that. And I want you just to kind of remember as we walk through this, remember those experiences and not only what all you were doing, but how you felt. You know, did you feel capable? Did you feel like you were in control? Did you feel joy? So I just want you to kind of keep that in mind as we move forward. And what we're going to be looking at in our time together is that play does not have to connect directly to a literacy-based activity to support literacy. So this includes all of those experiences you just put into the chat. All those experiences supported literacy. And in fact, you couldn't play those things without building the skills that probably helped you, with your reading and writing that you utilize now. Because when children are playing, regardless of what it is that they're playing, they're building those literacy foundations. So kind of my hope in our time that we have together is that we really have a paradigm shift of how we approach literacy. So instead of thinking of literacy like this, where it's a whole group instruction, or even if it's a hands-on experience and children are, engaging with something connected to the alphabet, those are things we typically label as literacy. But my hope is that we look at how young children actually develop literacy. And it's through experiences like this. It's children playing in the sandbox. It's children on the swing set, having big body gross motor play. And all the things that you just mentioned could go on the screen as well. But these are the play activities. These are the experiences that build the literacy foundations. And the reason is because literacy begins with embracing the whole child, not introducing reading and writing instruction at an early age. So you'll hear me say several times, this is really about a paradigm shift of how we approach literacy in the early years. So to help us with this, we need to look at actually what are the cornerstones? What are these foundational skills of language and literacy? And again, as we kind of move forward, I hope that you or encourage you to think of literacy not as a matter of teaching, but rather a matter of developing. What needs to develop to support children with reading and writing? So let's kind of take that mind shift. So this is a graph that's from my book, and I put it together many years ago, actually before I wrote my book. But I was asked, when I would talk about literacy foundations, I would have people ask me, okay, what is that? What does that look like? So I put it together, and then the graphic artist in my book did an amazing job making it look real nice and clean here. But this is kind of a snapshot of the foundations that support early literacy. So let's start on the left-hand side. We have our language. Language is the core of literacy. If you think about reading and writing, we're engaging with language. So language really is that pivotal foundation of literacy. And we can break language down to receptive and expressive, and then we can go even deeper, our auditory sense, our phonological awareness, which is the brain's ability to tune into the sounds of language. So we have sounds of language, and those sounds mixed together create meaning. And that phonological awareness is when children can recognize that we can actually separate those. So a story I like to tell as an example of phonological awareness, my cousin, when we were about 8 years old, he asked me, he goes, "Why are bad words bad words?" And I was like, I'm not sure. And he said, "If you think about it, they're just a bunch of sounds." And so what that showed was that he had separated the sounds of language from the meaning. Well, the reason bad words are bad words is because the combination of those sounds, it's that meaning that is the bad word. But that shows that phonological awareness. So it's recognizing that we have sounds and meaning of language. We have our expressive languages as, from a verbal standpoint, what we say, and that hinges on our cognitive processing, our articulation, which is pulling air from our lungs and manipulating our vocal cords, our teeth, our tongue, our mouth to create the sounds of language. Then we have the social and emotional aspect as well. So that is that core of literacy. But then let's hop over to this right side, and we can break literacy down between reading and writing. Then we can we're going on the reading side, we can break reading down between decoding and comprehension. Well, decoding hinges on our alphabet knowledge, which you can get deeper with that. We have the visual perception and the phonological awareness. So visual processing is the brain's ability to interpret and understand what's all coming in from the eyes. So that's kind of the foundation of alphabet knowledge. We have our print concepts, understanding that print carries meaning. It goes left to right, top down. And then we have comprehension, which is, we learn to read, then we read to learn. And so that's that comprehension aspect of it. Well, that hinges on literacy, memory recall, background knowledge. And then we have the writing aspect of literacy. And this can be broken down between writing composition, which is the coming up with the message and putting it onto paper. And that requires our language experiences that children want to share, or we as the adults want to share about. But then we have the motor aspect, which is that actual handwriting. And so one of my sayings is handwriting is a whole body experience. It's not just our fine motor skills. When we recognize how our body develops physically and then how it all works together, handwriting requires our entire body. So with this, we have our gross and fine motor skills, and we have within our body a process known as mobility on stability. So all of our movement of our body hinges on a stable fixture of our body. So all these gross motor muscles stabilize and support the movement of the smaller muscles. And that's really important when we look at not only just overall development, but handwriting. That mobility on stability is an important part of that. We have the eye-body connection, that brain and the body learning to work as a team, the brain's ability to cross the midline, so to take your hands and actually cross the midlines of your body. And then we have our internal senses. So we have our vestibular system, which is our sense of balance. This is what keeps our body upright and steady, keeps our head steady, our eyes steady. This is what helps us stay on the line when we're reading. And then our vestibular system also helps us keep our hand on the line as we're writing. Then we have our proprioceptive system, which is our body awareness, where we are in space, how much pressure and strength is needed for a task. So this is the sense that when we go to turn a page of a book, keeps us from ripping the page. Our brain regulates the system and says, this is how much pressure you need to turn that page. It's also when you're holding a pencil and pressing on a paper, this is what regulates that we don't push too hard, that we break the pencil, or that we are not putting enough pressure that you can't see what is written. So these are just kind of, like I mentioned earlier, this is just kind of a snapshot of what supports early literacy. And a lot of these we can go even in more detail on. A couple of things that I want to really draw your attention to is I want you to look down where it says alphabet knowledge. It's kind of down under decoding. Alphabet knowledge is necessary for literacy, but it's not sufficient on its own. And that's one of the reasons I like referring to this chart, is because it really gives us an overview of everything that's needed for early literacy. And a lot of times we want to hone in on just the alphabet. It's necessary, it's important, but we have all these other components as well. And you can say that about pretty much anything, that we look at. Phonological awareness, because we have a big emphasis on that now. Yes, it's necessary, it's important, but it's not sufficient on its own. And so when we look at this, again, it helps us understand why the whole child needs to develop to support literacy. And how do all of these things develop? They develop best through child-led play. If you go back to a lot of those experiences that you had as a child and you look at these foundational skills, you could recognize, what, a lot of these were developing just through my play experience I had in the summer or in the holidays. But that child-led play is a critical component for the development of these foundational skills. So we're going to take a second because you might notice I'm not saying just play, I'm saying child-led play. So I want to take a moment to kind of differentiate child-led play and an adult-guided, playful, hands-on experience. So when we talk about child-led play, play is of the child. If it's not of the child, it's not play. So here's a couple of, I almost jumped ahead there. What I would like for you all to do in the chat is I want you to put, when you go back to that play experience that I had you mention earlier, I want you to think about who was in control. Who was in control of that experience? Was it you as the child and your friends, or was it an adult guiding that play activity? And my panelists, I'd love for y'all to hop in and tell me, based on your favorite play experience, who was guiding that?
My favorite play experience, I had a little table just for making things in arts and crafts. And I would love if grown-ups came and joined me, but I did not love when they tried to manage the situation. So very, like, the self-direction was a big component of the joy in that for me.
And actually what you just mentioned, I'm going to talk about here in a little bit as to, we loved, when we were in control and invited the adult in. We're going to actually talk about that here in a little bit.
Oh, good.
And Stacy, you gave me homework on that one, so I came ready. So my Cabbage Patch doll, my sister and my friend, the adults wanted no part of this. I can just tell you. Yeah. We dressed the Cabbage Patch in some of our own clothes. I think we had some early 80s bangles on there. I mean, we designed the whole thing, and they really weren't welcome because it was like a creation of our own minds of like what we had these dolls doing and where we took them. So definitely child-led between my sister and our friends.
Same. I
Right.
mean, I had the opportunity of being in a neighborhood where there were lots and lots of children. So the adults weren't involved. So most of our things were, play outside until the adults called us back inside. So no adults around.
And when we look at play, and this is Dr. Peter Gray from his book Free to Learn, he says the overall goal of play is for it never to end. And you will do whatever it takes to keep the play experience going. And I think, what Kathy, you just said, it's like we didn't come inside or until our parents called us in because we wanted that play to continue on, forever and ever and as long as possible. All right, so keep kind of thinking about that as we continue to walk through. So this is a graph. This is also from my book, but it just kind of gives a visual when we talk about child-led play and what are the components of that. Well, if you notice the center, that is the child. So the child is the center of the play. They have the freedom, whether they want to engage in the play or not. It's totally up to them. The play is of their interest. And, if I was to ask you, were you interested in what you're playing? You're most likely going to say yes if you were guiding it because it was of you. It was of what you wanted to play and imagine and what you wanted to be. It was of your interest and it connected to your world. Children play until they're satisfied with the play. This is where that child-led repetition is so important because you'll see children repeat their play. And it might be they're trying to build a bigger block structure. It might be that they're trying to swing as high as they can on the swing, but they'll repeat that over and over until they get it to a level that they're satisfied with. And that's usually when they move on to something else. What we find with children is they actually challenge themselves more than we do, and they're more persistent to complete a task if it's of their doing. If it's their goal, they're going to stick with it until they achieve that goal. Children have complete ownership of the play. They get to choose the materials that they play, and it's their choice who they play with, how they play, where they play. They are in complete control of it. Now, the great thing about child-led play is it actually does lead to a lot of the learning standards that we're required to accomplish. Children's play can actually support that. It looks a lot different, but when we step back and let children play and start observing, we start recognizing, okay, these standards that I have to meet, I'm actually seeing evidence of it in their play. It's also building those foundational skills that we've been talking about as well that support literacy. Now, this next slide is just to give kind of a differing view of an activity that's adult guided. So this would be more of a standards-based practice. So this might be where we come up with an activity. It can still be engaging and hands-on, but it might be to meet a learning standard. Okay, we have this in our curriculum, or we have this in our standards that we have to meet. So let's come up with a hands-on experience. I have on here indifferent to the child. It doesn't mean the child doesn't care, but sometimes it's like, okay, it might not be what the child wants to do at that point, but they'll do it. These tend to be a little bit more teacher-led. They might have an actual set of directions. There might be a timed rotation. There might be required, participation of the child, and there might not be a choice if the child completes it or not. And so what I do have over here is we've kind of got the child over to the side. So this, when we are creating a hands-on experience that's adult guided, we want to kind of recognize, okay, is the child really a part of this, or is this of the child's interest? Now, I want to make sure, looking at this graph, I'm not saying adult-led experiences are bad. There's a time and there's a place, but we need to label it what it is. So this is an adult-guided, hands-on, interactive experience, but it is not the same as this, which is the child-led play. And there's a time and place for both, but we need to make sure that this is what children are getting an opportunity to experience, because children today, not only in our learning environments, but even when they go home, are not engaging in this child-led play. And it's so important for development that we need to start advocating for it. But I think part of our advocacy is being able to actually properly label what these two things are and making sure that they are both represented in our learning environments. So I am going to pause here because I just kind of threw a whole lot at y'all in that one little moment. But are there any kind of questions or thoughts on that?
I almost put in the chat, mic drop, name it what it is and acknowledge it and honor it. But we don't need to call it play if it's not. Like it has a very valuable place and it's meaningful, but they are two distinct things.
Yes. And I think that's, we make something hands-on and interactive and we label it play, but really and truly it's not. Now, I think that interactive, engaging, adult guided way better than doing worksheets and flashcards. But Erin, like you just said, these are two different things. They both hold value and they both can hold a space, but we've got to make sure that child-led play is getting its opportunity.
So Emily has a great question. Is there a hybrid between the adult-led and the child-led? And I might give you a for instance, which might be if an adult joins children in an interest area or play center and maybe starts or initiates a play prompt or engages in some play to then hopefully engage children with them. Where does that stand in this mix of play and child-led versus adult-led?
So my belief on play is that we don't, if it's child-led, we don't enter unless we have the invitation. And then if we have the invitation, we need to be available to enter the play, but then we follow the children's lead. It's kind of like if you go to your neighbor's house for dinner and they're the host, we don't take over while we're there. We, kind of offer to help. We kind of follow their cues and follow their lead. I used to, when I was teaching, when we had our playtime, I would just go sit down and just start playing. And I would find children would gravitate towards me. And I still followed their cues and would get conversations going. So I do think there is a way that we as the adults can participate in the play. But I think when it's child-led, we still have to respect that it's child-led. And we know that our place is just more of the playing alongside, not taking over. There's a saying that I use, other people use, we want to be careful that we're not stopping the learning by trying to teach. And so it's just kind of reading the situation and just making sure that we're not trying to take over and interrupt what could be just a great play together play experience.
And you have so much goodness, but I just want to bring in one other key question, which Jerry asked about. Do you think there's a ratio of child-led versus adult-led time, meaning equal parts throughout the day? Is it more child-led? If you were going to give a recommendation, what would you recommend?
So I think in our learning environments, because I'm realistic, but I'm such an advocate for child-led play, I would love to see more child-led play than adult, but I know that we have a lot of requirements on us. So I kind of mentioned this in the book. I kind of believe for every minute that we utilize as adult-led, we need to repay in child-led. So I really feel there needs to at least be an equal balance. My belief is to have more child-led because it's just so critical in overall child development.
Love that.
Okay. And if y'all still have questions, keep popping them in. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at, I'm going to actually give y'all some examples of how all play supports literacy. And so what we're going to look at is infant toddler play. So those of y'all who work with infant toddlers, I want y'all to see how that play supports literacy. We're going to look at construction, creative arts, sensory, and gross motor. So let's start with our infant toddler plays. And I want to thank Becker's for letting me take these pictures from their website to give us good visuals of infants and toddlers playing. And the slides we have coming up, the pictures are from their websites as well. But a couple of things that I want to note or really emphasize is tummy time and crawling is critical for physical development. It's critical for handwriting. It's critical for literacy. So we need our children on the floor and moving and playing. And especially when children are on their tummies and they're crawling, they're engaging their neck and their torso and their upper back and their shoulders. And again, that's when we talked about earlier, the mobility on stability. Our neck and our torso and our back really are the hub of that. They really support the shoulder, which supports the entire arm. So we need children in that tummy time. We need them crawling around, engaging those systems. Another thing, all these children are playing, as they're playing with something, what do children do? They're tracking it. So the child with the car, or the child down here with the balls, children track the object. Well, that's a component of visual perception. Well, what do we do when we're reading and writing? We're tracking the words on a page, or we're tracking the words as we're writing them. So that tracking begins in this infant toddler phase. Children playing with puzzles or playing with blocks, when they're moving those objects around, they start to recognize that no matter what position I put this object in, it stays the same shape. Well, that concept helps develop what's known as form constancy. And that is, no matter what I do, the form stays the same. Well, that is the skill that our brain needs. So when it sees the letter A written in different fonts, the brain goes, oh, it's still the letter A. So that's that form constancy. So that develops playing with blocks, playing with puzzles. But I do want to draw attention to the child who has the wheelbarrow full of blocks. So those of y'all who work with toddlers know that they love nothing more than to fill containers up, walk them around the room, and then empty them. It's that dumping and filling that they love to do over and over and over. So let's look at what's happening with children's brains and their play. Experiences wire the brain, repetition strengthens the wiring. And the experiences are the play, and the repetition is that child-led repetition we kind of talked about earlier. Children's brains are very intuitive though. So their brains are telling their bodies what they need, and then their bodies and actions are telling us. So let's look at this toddler who is walking around with a container full of blocks or books or whatever it may be. Their brain is saying, you know what, we've got to engage our body. We've got to figure these systems out. We've got to figure out how we all work together to function in the environment. And when a child's walking around with a box of heavy objects, the brain is engaging that proprioceptive and vestibular system. It's going, okay, this is what we need to do to stay steady. But the brain's also saying, this is how much strength we need from our muscles and our joints to carry this around. Or the child with the wheelbarrow, this is how much strength we need. But the moment that container is empty, the child's brain goes, wait a second, this is lighter. We need to have a different regulation here. We need to change this up. We don't need as much pressure and strength for that. And so it's that brain really regulating those systems. But remember, repetition strengthens the wiring. So these children need to do it over and over and over. So the brain and the body can, again, engage and really learn to regulate these systems. And again, how does this tie into literacy? This is what keeps our eyes and our hands steady. This is what helps regulate how much pressure we use turning a page, writing, whatever it may be. So infant toddler teachers, this is where literacy begins. And then just to point out, we don't have anything on this screen with the alphabet or anything that might be typically labeled literacy, yet this is very much building those literacy foundations. Okay, construction play. So this could be block play, building play. Anytime children are, picking up blocks, moving them around, they're engaging, again, the vestibular system, they're crossing midlines. A lot of times when children are on the floor building with blocks or bristle blocks or whatever it may be, they're engaging in what's called bilateral coordination, which is using both sides of the body together. But I think if a child is like crawling around and they put one hand down and they reach over and grab a block. Well, that's an asymmetrical movement. What do we do when we're holding a book? We keep one part of our body still and move the other. When we're writing, we have one part still, we move the other. Well, that develops through children on the floor, building blocks, crawling around. Again, that bilateral coordination, it's not something that's taught, it's something that's developed. And it's developed through, again, having these repetitive experiences over and over and over. We have the visual perception, visual discrimination, telling the difference between the blocks. That ties into being able to tell the difference between letters. If a child is digging through a tub of blocks, and they only see a portion of the block, but their brain goes, oh, this is what the rest of that block is. That's what's known as visual closure. So when the brain can see part of an object, but then the brain closes the rest of the image. Well, tie this into literacy down the line. When children become familiar with words, this helps fluency. The brain sees just the first part of the word, and the brain closes what the rest of that word is. That all begins, with block and construction play. Of course, we have the fine motor skills. And when we talk about handwriting, before children can achieve a grip, they have to develop what's known as separation of hand. So I want everybody just to take your hand and kind of turn the palm towards your face and draw a line between your ring finger and your middle finger down your palm. And then pull your pinky and your ring finger down, and then leave your middle index and thumb up. So, and you can probably, it's a little bit difficult, but you can probably use pull those down separately. But when you can really use your hand as two parts, that's known as separation of hand. Well, that needs to develop before children can ever achieve a proper grip. They also need to have finger isolation and finger strength, but they've got to have that separation of hand before they can actually hold the pencil. Because if you look at it, again, mobility on stability, it's these three fingers that are mobilized, but our ring finger and pinky finger are providing that stability. So that separation of hand develops through children using their hands and moving things such as pegs, or like the small world people, is really kind of engaging that separation of hand. Also, the dramatic play elements. Anytime you come up with a story that ties into writing comprehension, children change their voices when they are engaged in dramatic play. So that is working sound awareness and phonological awareness. And then having materials that with no batteries. Down here we have the train, but when children are engaged in this type of play and they create the sounds, of the materials. So they might be, saying choo, 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 choo. Well, they're hearing those phonemes over and over and over. So they're hearing the sounds of language. So that's very important for that phonological awareness. Phonological awareness culminates with phonemic awareness, which is the brain's ability to hear the smallest unit of sound in language. And that's needed before children can assign sounds to letters. That's needed for decoding words. Well, it develops through children engaged in this type of play where they're playing around with their voices and they're playing around with sounds. So that's just looking at how construction play supports language and literacy. Our creative arts play. I am a huge, huge advocate of blank paper and crayons, or blank paper and anything that children can create on. And the materials that you're seeing here don't have to be confined to an art center. Blank paper and crayons need to be throughout the entire environment, because when we look at how writing composition develops, it begins with children running their hand through, the food on their tray. This is talking about our older infants are running their hand through paint and then realizing I can make a mark. And then eventually we give them a crayon and they might start making marks with the crayon. Well, that turns into random scribbling. That turns into controlled scribbling. And then eventually we start to see images that kind of look like something. And then children start to attribute meaning to it. And then children start to tell stories. So instead of just saying it's a house, this is my grandma's house we went to this weekend. And then children start to become, their pictures start to grow more into stories. And eventually what happens if children have, the opportunity for blank paper and crayons, or blank paper and the ability to create what they want, eventually you're going to start to see letters emerge on the paper. And that truly is when we see that children recognize that the alphabet exists and serves a purpose. That's the beginning of print awareness. The letter that's going to emerge is most likely going to be the first letter of their first name, but then they're going to start experimenting more with the letters. And they start doing letter strings. Then as the phonological awareness starts to develop, they start assigning that to letters. You see the invented spelling. Eventually, then that goes into conventional spelling. But that's that whole writing process. And it starts with children just being able to create on blank paper. So I can't emphasize this enough, but I feel like creative arts play, anytime children can create something and then they can attribute meaning and tell you a story about it. It's so important for that writing comprehension. Of course, we have all the visual perception, taking place. Children need to be on vertical surfaces a lot, because when you hold your arm up on a vertical surface, you're engaging that shoulder and developing that shoulder stability. Anything with friction, like crayons, have more friction than markers. So it kind of helps the brain and the hand connect with how much pressure is needed, and just really kind of developing that brain-hand connection. Children using scissors, that helps develop that separation of hand. And then that proprioceptive system, how much pressure needed for a task, well, that regulates when children are using glue, which they can't regulate that unless they have the opportunity. And they might have, we might have where they do a whole glob of glue, but they've got to have those experiences for the brain to go, wait, this is all the pressure that we need. So the creative arts play, and again, it have blank paper and crayons throughout the classroom where children can bring that into their play as they see fit. But that is just so critical for these, the literacy foundations that we've been looking at. And then our sensory play. Looking at like sensory tubs, water tubs, sandboxes, I want you to imagine what it feels like, to take a shovel and dig it into sand, or to take your hand through a water table, what that feels like. So that's engaging a lot of our physicalities. We're engaging the proprioceptive system. We're engaging that mobility on stability. We're crossing midline. So all those physical experiences that we've just talked about. From a visual perception, if you're looking through the sandbox and you only see part of an object, again, that visual closure, the form constancy as you move everything around. And we can put materials into the sensory play that helps again engage that separation of hand. Children picking up a bucket of sand, and they're really engaging that neck and that torso. And then think about the sounds that you hear. First off, you're playing alongside your friend, the language and everything that is going on, but all the sounds that are happening in the environment as well, that's engaged during sensory play. And then our gross motor play. So not shown on the screen, but children need to be outside playing. And they need to be climbing, they need to be swinging, they need to have merry-go-rounds, seesaws, things that we don't see that exist as much anymore. But children need that big body, risky movement, because again, their brains are telling them, we need to get up, we need to engage and develop these systems. We need to climb and develop these muscles. Our eyes and our bodies need to learn to work as a team. Our brain and our body needs to learn to work as a team. And that happens through children outside playing. So several of the play experiences I saw that you all put in the chat, quite a few of them were outside play. And we loved that outside play, and we repeated that play over and over and over, because again, our brains are saying, we need this, we need to engage and regulate these systems. So that gross motor play develops a lot of those foundations for early literacy. Really, truly, handwriting begins on the playground. But I get questions a lot. Okay, we get that part, but how do we bring gross motor into our indoor learning environments? And so these are, I think, great examples of materials that really kind of encourage this type of play. One of the things you might notice is most of the things we see here, children are engaged in an unstable surface. So again, back that mobility on stability. When we take away the stability of the environment, our body seeks stability within itself. So that's really when we engage our core and our abs. So what I'd like for you all to do, if you're sitting there, if you're sitting at a table, I want you to pull your backs up off the back of the chair, and then pull your arms up off the table, and then pull your feet up off the floor. And what you probably notice is you've very much engaged your abs and you engaged your core. And that's because we took away a lot of the stability of the environment. And so again, our body seeks that stability. Well, that mobility on stability is a critical component in our handwriting. So giving children opportunities to experience uneven surfaces or unstable surfaces really helps them engage that core. It also helps, again, that vestibular and proprioceptive system that I've talked so much about because I'm so passionate about it. But children just moving their bodies and engaging them. Again, the different movements where they're up and down, that's crossing some of the midlines. And then making sure that children have the opportunity to climb. Again, their brains are telling them we have to develop these systems. So their brain is telling them we need to climb. If they don't have an opportunity to climb, that's when they're going to be climbing all the furniture because their bodies need that. So making sure they have those opportunities. And then again, even our children who are 4 and 5 need to have that tummy time, engage in that crawling to still kind of refine and develop all those muscles and again, just really the body learning to cross the midlines, developing the regulation of those systems. And then when children are playing with each other, again, that language, they're experiencing that phonological awareness. But again, all the things that support literacy foundations. So just kind of looking at those play experiences, what questions might you have, or even some thoughts of, okay, I didn't think of it that way, but now I'm making this connection and this makes sense.
Well, Stacy, while we pause, to please put your questions in the Q&A or comments right in the chat. Like if you had, I was looking for the mind blown emoji. I wanted to use that one on a couple of them. Like, yes, this is the comment. So if you have any like just mic drop moments or things that were really sticking in your mind, put those in the chat as well, or questions in the Q&A. But Stacy, you really did some, you included some specific language about our senses. You mentioned proprioceptive sense. You mentioned vestibular. Just on those two senses, can you explain those a little bit more? So what is our proprioceptive sense and our vestibular sense? What do they impact?
So our vestibular sense is our sense of balance. And so it is just really what keeps us upright, keeps us steady. It keeps our eyes steady, it keeps our hands steady. So that's that vestibular system. It really is the core when we look at what children need to develop for attention in the classroom down the line. That vestibular system is the core of that. Because if your vestibular system is not fully developed, a child's more concerned with how do I stay upright in my chair or how do I get comfortable. It's like their cognitive process is really consumed with the vestibular system opposed to listening to the teacher. So that vestibular system is really the core of functioning in the environment and paying attention. But again, when it comes to literacy, it's what keeps everything steady as we're reading, as we're writing. And the proprioceptive system, this is just the awareness of where our body is in space. So if you're like walking through a door frame, this is what keeps us from running into the wall. Our eye with our proprioceptive system goes, okay, move here. Let's go, go forward. It's also how much strength is needed for a task. So a good example is if you go to a refrigerator and you're getting out a gallon of milk that you think is full, but actually it's empty. What happens is your brain goes, we need this much strength. But when you go to pull it out, you're using too much strength because the object has deceived you. But that's our proprioceptive system. And it really helps us regulate our environment and just, whatever task we're doing, how much pressure, how much strength. The thing to remember about these two senses is children are not just born and they just come about. It's also not something that's taught. It's something that develops, and it develops through being challenged. So again, children's brains tell their bodies what they need. And so this is why we see children spinning and hanging upside down and wanting to climb up the slide and wanting to twist up on the swings, because their brains are telling them, unless we have this movement, this is not going to develop. And, we're not allowing children to have a lot of this risky movement or this big body movement. And that's one of the reasons that we're seeing when children get to elementary school, they don't have this self-regulation. Well, self-regulation is kind of the core of self-control. And, when you're not regulated with your body, it makes it difficult to function in the environment.
So Stacy, I've got 3 questions that I'm going to hold just till your next break, because I want to make sure that you have time to cover the content.
Okay. All right. So let's talk, how do we design our environments? And a couple of these we've already mentioned, but we would make sure that when we're designing our learning environments, that children have plenty of space to play. So I know sometimes we design the learning environment for our teacher guided times, and that's fine, but we also want to make sure that we've designed our environments for play, where children can really get on the floor and move around. So making sure children have plenty of space. As you're selecting materials to go into the environment, make sure that they meet the children's interest. What connects to the children's world? What's important to them? Because that's what they're going to play. I have a lot of people who say, again, our children don't know how to play. Well, is our environment meeting their needs? Is our environment responsive to what it is that they want to play? And so that needs to guide the materials you put in there. And I think this really kind of challenges the thought of, oh, let's put all the theme, materials in there. Well, if it's all ocean and I don't care about the ocean, of course, I'm not going to play a whole lot. But what's important to the children I'm serving right now, the children who are in my classroom presently, and the materials we bring in need to connect to their world and their interest. And then we need chunks of uninterrupted time. My recommendation is at least an hour and a half of uninterrupted time that children can actually just dig deep into the play. If you can do longer, even better. If you're a full day program that goes, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., I recommend having the hour and a half both in the morning and the afternoon. This is outside of recess time. Angela Hanscom, who wrote Balanced and Barefoot, she's an occupational therapist. She says 3 to 5 year olds should have 5 to 8 hours of child-led uninterrupted time a day. So that, but children need that chunk of time. It's kind of like if we dig into a book that we're really into, we want to sit there and read for a while. We don't want to be, continually be interrupted. We want that long chunk of time. So we want to make sure we're giving that to children. And then our role, we've kind of mentioned this too, but our role is to get out of the way. We design the environment that's responsive to the children, then we step back, and then we're available. We're available. So if a child says, hey, will you come play with me? How powerful that we can say, yes, I can. I can come sit down next to you, and I'm going to play what you want to play because you're that important to me, and that relationship that we build. Or we're available if a child brings us a drawing and says, look at this. And I can sit there and engage with that child. Tell me about it. And I don't have to be rushed to something else. I can truly, truly listen. Do you want to tell me about it? Do you want me to write what you're saying? And children seeing their verbal words turn into print is such a powerful connection. But the fact that we're available for that. And if we show interest, what happens? The child's going to go back and do that more and more and more, which is going to help them with those developmental processes that they go through. If you've designed the environment and nobody has invited you into the play, this is your time to step back, observe, document what you're seeing, document the development and the learning standards you're seeing. Also document what's interesting to the child. What else do I need to bring into this environment to keep these experiences going? And we need to make sure that we are trusting children and let them play. Kind of going back to our play experiences, that we were the ones in charge of it. We felt capable. We felt like we were in control. And I'm sure if I was to ask you, I feel like if I was to ask my parents, they would say that they trusted me. And so we need to trust children, and we need to trust them to figure the play out. But we need to give them that control. They can't develop self-control unless we hand that control over to them. But I don't want to say I guarantee, but my experience was when I have an environment that met children's interest and need, that's really when a lot of our behavior problems came down, because they were in control and they got to go into a world that was meaningful to them. So we've got to trust them to play. And we've got to remember that all child-led play supports literacy. This is a great, an optimal way for all of these foundational skills that we've talked about. Child-led play is one of the best ways for all of these to develop. Now we can have, adult guided experiences, but I always believe when you put them side by side and you really start analyzing all of the foundations that are being developed when children are leading their play, my experience has been it's always been a little bit way more than maybe just a few things we're working on that comes about in an adult guided activity. And then just to kind of leave us, as we're wrapping up and kind of open it up for some questions, just when you're having your conversations with your stakeholders or your coworkers, just kind of continually coming back to play does not have to connect directly to a literacy-based activity to support literacy. All play is supporting all these foundations. And, I just find when we can actually explain these foundations and we can get very in-depth and intricate with it, that helps when we're having these conversations with our stakeholders and being able to prove to them, yes, it doesn't have to be labeled literacy and it doesn't have to be just the alphabet. As long as children are playing, they're building these foundations of literacy. So, any other questions?
We definitely have several. And so before, I know we're going to have questions probably even into 10 minutes after. So since we're still in time, can you tell us, Stacy, though, how we can find you and engage with you? Because I think you do more than just write the book. You're more than an author. You also provide other services. How can we learn more about you?
Yeah, that's a great segue to my next slide there. So here is my website, stacybenge.com. And if you go to there, you can link to my book. I also am a presenter and a trainer. So I love, as you can tell, love talking about literacy and the foundations of literacy and how child-led play supports that. So if you're interested in some of the other resources I have to offer, or interested in me coming to speak for your organization, if you go to my website, you can find all the info there. And my book is published by Exchange Press. And this is the website that takes you directly to my book. And then here's my email. So if in like a week you're like, wait, what? And you want to follow up with me and ask another question, feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, please put your questions into the Q&A or the chat, but I'm going to start with the 3 that we have on hold, Stacy. And one was really critical, I think, in connection about the environments and connecting children's interests to the environments, because the question was from Lisa saying, what do you do when you get the dreaded, I'm bored, I don't know what to play?
And I think that, when you have the child who says that, that's a good opportunity for us to say, well, what would you like to play with? If we could bring anything in here, what is it that you would like to play? And that's an indicator to us that we need to bring other materials in that actually do connect to what connects to their world and what they're interested in. And so, and to me, again, if the materials do not connect to the child, they're not going to connect to it. So they're not going to want to engage and play with those.
Yeah, very true. And that can be hard without that detective work, right? When you said sit back and observe when the children are showing you the signs of their interest.
Mm-hmm.
There were other questions about addressing hand or side dominance. So one was directly related to how do we support left-handed or left dominance? And then the follow-up to that was kind of how do we determine, or is it hard to determine which side, and then support the child in their early writing skills?
I think definitely that we, like if you have scissors that are just for right-handed, make sure that we do have scissors or anything of that nature that is specific to a hand. Make sure you have both available in the environment. But I think looking at how that dominant hand develops, before it develops, children have to be able to cross their midlines. So the brain is all about efficiency, and it wants to be lean and its movement, and we don't want extra steps. And so if a child cannot cross their midline, you're going to see them like turn their body, and pick up with both hands. But once their brain starts to cross the midline, the brain starts kind of taking over and saying, wait, we can be way more efficient. Instead of picking something up like this, I can just take one of the hands across the body. Now, I think an OT would have to answer as to, why a child goes to a certain side. I'm not sure of that. But I do know that ability to cross the midline usually has to be developed where the brain starts really kind of mainstreaming. I guess it signals to one side.
Love that. Team, is there anything else that I missed? Oh, I have another one. Ooh, any special considerations for neurodiverse learners from Emily?
A lot of things that I bring in are honestly like from occupational therapists, and but I would just make sure that that child, again, stepping back, observing them, kind of seeing what their comfort zone and what their comfort area is, and just making sure, again, what are their interests, what motivates them, but just making sure that we're bringing materials in that are really responsive to their needs. If they're working with a specialist, an OT or an SLP or a PT or whatever it may be, I would definitely have conversations with a therapist on ideas of materials you need to make sure that's in your environment. Again, that meets the needs that they have.
Great, thank you. Kathy, anything else that you saw before I turn it back over to you to wrap us up?
No, I think that's it. I mean, Stacy, I think the way you ended, talking about sharing, getting this information to stakeholders, that was in the back of my mind the whole time. I'm like, share this with parents, share this with administrators, and say, this is what we're doing. It is so important that they get this. It's not sitting down and reading and writing, it's playing. So I appreciate you ending that way.
Thank you.